Okidoki. When you watch Takopi's original sin, the most obvious takeaway is that this is an anime about abuse. Let that be your content warning, because the things these characters go through are absolutely not for the faint of heart. This anime is a very visceral portrayal of these kids trapped in a living nightmare, but there's also something else as well. Something more to just the pain and suffering. There are various shades to Takopi's abuse, both in how they're hurt by the ones they should trust the most, and how they end up hurting others as well. Now, before we start, since we are covering a sensitive topic, I want to clarify that I am in no way an expert in this topic. This video will be about my personal observations along with some simple googling. If I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments below. With that out of the way, Takopii has 4 unfortunate main characters: Shizuka, Marina, Asuma, and Takopii himself. Each of them are in some way mistreated by their parents, their mothers being the main perpetrators that we see, although their fathers are in no way any better. But the thing that stands out the most to me is how each household seems to represent a different form of abuse. I think we should start with Marina, because her case is the most obvious to talk about, as she is unfortunately being physically abused. Marina's household is in kind of a rough spot due to Marina's father having an affair with Shizuka's mother, which I'm sure you can imagine causes a lot of arguments and stress between Marina's parents. This stress often being redirected towards Marina herself. When Marina behaves in a way that her mother disapproves of, which ends up being any number of minor inconveniences, Marina is subjected to constant physical harm, like getting slapped across the face, having her hair pulled, and even threatening to stab her in the eye. It gets so bad that during one of these many beatings, a glass her mother was holding broke and ended up scarring Marina's face. This abuse, as horrible as it is something that unfortunately ends up getting imprinted. Children are impressionable, so these awful acts can often be passed on from parent to child. Marina, unable to fight back against her mother, learns that violence should be used both as an outlet for stress along as a method to get her way, which we see get turned towards an easy target, Shizuka. We all see how Marina bullies her, breaking her stationery, hiding her belongings, but when Marina actually starts getting violent, we begin to see the parallels between her and her mother more clearly. Slapping Shizuka across the face, pulling Shizuka's hair, grabbing a pen, and stabbing Shizuka in the eye. The cycle of abuse is ever turning. And it's not just Shizuka that we see Marina treat this way. When Takopii meets Marina for the first time, in the future, I really hope you've seen the anime so you can keep up, Marina subjects Takopii to the same abuse, slapping Takopii, beating Takopii, kicking Takopii. Being the naive little alien that he is, Takopii sees the way Marina's mother treats her and simply believes that this must just be normal for humans.
マリナちゃんがいつも僕を強く触るのはママの真似っこしてたんだっぴよね。マリナちゃんもきっといいお母さんになれるっぴ。
There are many reasons why Takopii is written to be so naive, and one of them is because he is supposed to be a stand-in for a child, or even a pet, as our first introduction to him is us finding him like a stray animal. This anime is constantly portraying how abuse gets passed on from person to person, with the parents abusing their child, and the child in turn abusing Takopii. That's why Takopii is the way that he is, so that he cannot and will not defend himself. We can see this again in Shizuka, the second one to technically find Takopii, and the first one we actually see in the show. Shizuka's mother is an escort, which means that she is constantly away from home doing work. So Shizuka is often left to fend for herself, which means that Shizuka is unfortunately being neglected. While she does have access to food, it's pretty safe to assume that her mother does not cook for her, seen with this remark, "Fix yourself dinner, I'll be home before morning." There's actually quite a bit we can grab from this small scene, where Shizuka has lost her dog Chappy, the one and only comfort that she has. The way her mother coldly informs Shizuka of Chappy being taken away, how she ignores and brushes off Shizuka's lethargic behavior, saying it was a dog he just left behind in the first place. It's all just one big bother to her, having to apologize to Marina's parents due to Chappy biting Marina, asking Shizuka to spare me the extra trouble, will you? The fact that she doesn't even take her back home, she just ditches her at the police station and grabs a taxi to go back to work, leaving Shizuka to find her own way home. It's so awful that it's almost kind of funny, because this is like the only time we actually see Shizuka's mother interact with her on screen. The neglect goes so far that she never even talks to her again for the rest of the anime. And we see this neglect being transferred to Takopii. It's not as obvious as Marina, but a lot of the early interactions have Takopii showing off some new happy gadgets in hopes of putting a smile on Shizuka's face, and Shizuka basically ignoring him and brushing him off. While you can argue about reasoning Shizuka ignores Takopii because she's too pessimistic and depressed to play with him, these interactions are very similar to a child showing off a nice drawing to their parents, and the parent just brushing them off and discarding their gift. There's also the scene where Chappy ends up chewing on Takopii like a dog toy, and instead of saving him, Shizuka just tells Chappy to not eat him and walks off. While she does eventually grab some dog food, which stops Takopii from becoming dog food, it's very clear that she does not care too much about Takopi's safety. Again, there is a very clear parallel between Shizuka's mother failing to care for Shizuka and Shizuka failing to care for Takopii. And then we have Azuma, our class representative that tries to help Shizuka and Marina, who unfortunately suffers from emotional manipulation. Azuma is constantly trying to live up to his mother's expectations, which is to be nothing but perfect, because she is a doctor, and anything less than perfect can result in a patient's death. So Azuma simply needs to get 100 on the test. Easy, right? If he doesn't get 100, well, he just doesn't get pancakes. Azuma's mother made them just for him, but if Azuma can only get 95, those pancakes unfortunately have to be thrown away. You'll do better next time, right, Azuma? Mommy doesn't want to have to keep throwing them away, but what can she do? You just keep failing. Is it even worth making these pancakes? Your brother could always score 100, so why can't you? Why can't you do it? Why do you keep failing? Maybe it's about time we just give up on you, Azuma. You can see how this can emotionally destroy a child. And that's not even mentioning when Azuma's mother actually gave up on him after he got a bad score when Marina's body was found. She didn't consider that maybe Azuma was possibly stressed out from his classmate dying. She just thought that he was being childish. I have no words for how awful this makes me feel. This relationship is also something that gets transferred, transforming into Azuma constantly talking down to Takopii, viewing him as nothing but a nuisance and a failure. The first time they directly interact, he instantly criticizes Takopi's way of speaking and tells him to shut up. Granted, he was still reeling from the fact that Marina's skull just got caved in 5 minutes ago, but you can definitely see the same parallels again. When Takopii again tries to help Azuma with his happy gadgets, Azuma has absolutely no belief in Takopi's capabilities, saying, "It's fine, I wasn't counting on them anyway." Even at the end, when he's trying to have an actual heart-to-heart with Takopii, he just can't help but call him dumb, just like how his mother always treated him. I'm sure you can now understand how each parent's abuse gets passed on to their child, but this relationship actually goes even further. We mentioned how Takopii is in a parent-child relationship with these children, but this relationship can also be reversed. Takopi's original goal is to make these children happy, so he also dons a pseudo-parental role for these three. So, how does Takopii look after these children after having learnt from all their abuse? Well, when Shizuka commits, she does so via Takopi's reconciliation ribbon, a happy gadget that was originally meant to help Shizuka and Marina get along. Takopii was ordered to never allow others to use these gadgets without supervision, but in his hopes that Shizuka can finally smile, he decides to give it to her to use by herself. Shizuka's death is caused by the fact that Takopii failed to supervise her, which can be seen as Takopii neglecting Shizuka. Marina's death happens when Takopii, while trying to save Shizuka, hits Marina in the head with his camera. Violence is once again used to control an unruly child. Takopii learned this from Marina herself. Takopi's physical abuse is what leads to Marina's death. Azuma is actually an interesting case because there's not really a clear case of Takopii ever being emotionally manipulative towards him. However, that may just be because instead of Takopii, Shizuka is the one to manipulate Azuma instead. Since all Azuma ever wanted was to please his mother, to receive her love, Shizuka very quickly picks up on this and takes advantage of him, making him help her hide Marina's body, goading him into stealing his brother's ring as revenge, making him confess to killing Marina, all so that she wouldn't have to be called in during school holidays. She hugs him, she kisses him, she says she'll wait for him to get out of jail, that she won't give up on him. She gives Azuma the affection he so sorely misses from his household in return for his obedience. Shizuka's emotional manipulation leads to Azuma's downfall. Even in the future, when Azuma breaks up with Marina to go out with Shizuka, it's very strongly implied that Shizuka manipulated Azuma to get revenge on Marina. It's not even that out of character for Shizuka, this is just another trait passed on from mother to child, since Shizuka's mother is literally a saleswoman in the unconventional sense. She sells her services, using her seductiveness to convince men to give her money, crawling her way into other people's pockets like she did with Marina's father. This isn't to throw shade at workers, any sort of sales job is inherently manipulative, nor does this absolve Marina's father of any wrongdoing. This is a two-way street, he is the one cheating on his wife. But I simply want to paint the example of how Shizuka was able to learn how to charm and manipulate others from her mother. Which leaves us with just little old Takopii, because he too has his own unique abuse. You see the title, Takopi's Original Sin, and you might think, oh, his original sin was killing Marina, or no, it was going back in time to try and kill Shizuka. However, I think there's a much better example of what Takopi's original sin is, and that is toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is simply the mindset that you should always be positive. Always. No matter what. It's not only being positive, but also the rejection of all negative emotions. Takopii is always positive and does not understand negative emotions. He tries to help these children and make them as happy as he is, but he is severely under-equipped and fails to actually comprehend the reasons why they're unhappy. His happy gadgets are always just band-aid solutions, distractions meant to ignore the problems his children go through. He does try to get a better grasp of things, like coming to school to see what the cause of Shizuka's is, but he only ever has a surface level understanding, only ever helping with minor inconveniences. Even with Marina, when faced with the death of her mother, Takopii only momentarily listens to Marina in a panic stupor, blames Shizuka for everything that happened. Takopii interprets this as the only way to make Marina happy is to go back in time to kill Shizuka. He doesn't give her problem any other thought, simply deciding that this is the best way to reach positivity. Takopi's original sin isn't just one singular failing, one fatal mistake. Takopi's original sin is the culmination of everything he doesn't do, too preoccupied with simply trying to force positivity onto others instead of providing them with proper support or an outlet for their emotions. Takopii only ever deals with symptoms and always ignores the root cause of their problems. And lo and behold, Takopi's toxic positivity is also passed down from mother to child. When Takopii goes back home to use the time machine, Takopi's mother decides to erase Takopi's memories. Not because Takopii wants to kill Shizuka, she doesn't even understand what killing is, but simply because he broke their #1 rule. It's not clearly stated what it was, but from her dialogue we can assume that the rule Takopii broke was either not bringing a happy person back to Planet Happy, or simply the fact of abandoning someone unhappy to come back home. When faced with a problem, a troublemaker, Takopi's mother decides to erase his memories, to return him to a happy newborn state, and then just banishes him forever. When faced with unknown and negative emotions, Takopi's mother ignores them, a staple of toxic positivity, forcing Takopii back into the same old mindset. That's what makes Takopi's final conversation with Asuma so important. Takopii, confused over what to do, originally tasked to kill Shizuka for hurting Marina, discovers that both of them do good and bad things. Marina hurts Takopii, Marina helps Takopii, Shizuka hurts Takopii, Shizuka also helps Takopii. Takopii is unable to handle the contradiction. How can someone be both good and bad at the same time? But that's just how humans are. We aren't always positive and we aren't always negative. We are a mixture of both, and to deny all negative emotions is inherently unhealthy and only serves to make your problems worse. So after finally learning what it means to be human, is Takopii finally able to make these children happy? Well, after he finally talks it out with Shizuka and apologizes for not trying to understand her better, he decides to once again travel back in time, back to before Takopi's original sin, and uses his remaining influence to simply make these characters do the same thing he did. Finally, talk it out. Asuma finally argues with his brother. Shizuka and Marina end up crying together instead of taking their pain out on each other. Each of them stops and actually decides to have a conversation about what they're going through. Is this a perfect solution? No. Is it possibly a little rushed? Maybe. But I don't think the story ever wanted to provide a perfect solution. The story could have easily been written in a way where Takopii just time travels even further and stops Shizuka, Marina's and Asuma's parents from ever abusing them. But would that really fix anything? These households were already falling apart from the start. No amount of fixing or killing could ever really solve these situations. Takopi's solution is just one that he stated all the way from the beginning, helping Shizuka and Marina to reconcile. Because while their lives are still shit, Marina still has that scar on her face showing how all their family situations are in no way any better than before. At least they now have someone to lean on, someone to help them not feel so lonely. Marina now has Shizuka, Shizuka now has Marina, and Asuma now has his brother Junior. Takopii has given them the gift of having someone to rely on, something they so sorely lacked from their parents. And with this, maybe, just maybe, the cycle of abuse can finally stop with them.
もう一人じゃない君たちがきっと大人になれるように。ありがとう。バイバイ。